How's it going, everybody? This is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. Today's conversation is one I'm especially excited about because we're diving deep into the psychology of a real estate transaction. Buying or selling a home isn't just about numbers on a page, it's about human emotions, mindset, and the often unseen forces that drive decisions. Joining me is someone who brings an incredibly unique perspective to this topic. His name is Julian Domanico. Julian is a licensed real estate agent with Fox Roach Realtors based out of the Harper in Rittenhouse Square. And beyond his success in real estate, Julian also has an extraordinary academic background in psychology and neuropsychology, studying at the University of Pennsylvania and focusing on patients with anxiety disorders, OCD, PTSD, and other mental health issues. The depth of his experience gives Julian a one-of-a-kind lens on the emotional and psychological factors that shape the way buyers and sellers think and act during a real estate transaction. So today we're diving deep into psychology and real estate with my special guest, Julian Domanico. With me today is someone that I've been keeping my real estate eye on ever since he won Rookie of the Year a few years back. His name is Julian Domanico, super agent out of our Fox and Roach office, the Harper in Rittenhouse Square. Julian, how's it going today?
Hey, Jason, it's going very well. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to talk about business, psychology, and anything else we get into.
I'm excited to have you with me today for a million different reasons. Your background is pretty amazing. It spans not only your quickly growing real estate business, but you've been involved in nonprofit work, advocacy work, government and politics. You were the chairperson of the City of Philadelphia's Millennial Advisory Committee. And you just happen to be a part-time model in your spare time. That's funny because you and me have that in common. And those are just a few of the impressive bullet points on your resume. But today, we are here to talk about something in your wheelhouse that is completely different than what I just mentioned. And that is to have a conversation about the human psychology of a real estate transaction, particularly when our clients are dealing with the everyday stressors and complications of what can be a roller coaster ride of emotions through the process of buying or selling a home. So as agents, our job is not only to be the quarterback of a real estate transaction, but also the calming, steadying force that can keep our people focused on the goal of making it to the finish line and settlement day. So with all that said, if we can, I'd love to start by asking you about your background in psychology, number one. And if you're willing to share, let's start with a little bit about you and your past and how you eventually ended up finding your way to real estate.
Jason, well, I really appreciate that very, very warm introduction and
very long introduction at that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then run down my resume. Well, as you said, psychology has been a huge piece of my life. I came to Philadelphia when I was 18 to go to the University of Pennsylvania, and I majored in psychology. Through that process, I did a lot of research with people with anxiety disorders in the clinical setting, and I would have different types of strategies that we'd use to try to lessen their anxiety. I worked with PTSD patients. I published in OCD, in particular, a paper discussing the barriers to treatment that Black Americans face in the current psychological system. I then transitioned to neuropsychiatry, where I worked in a neuroscience lab as a research assistant with children under 21 who were on their way to having psychosis. So although I'm not a doctor, I have really learned a lot about psychology and neuroscience that I have employed in my own personal life, my professional life throughout the years, and then, of course, in real estate.
Yeah, that's amazing. As we always talk about in this podcast, real estate is usually not the career that people dive into right away, right? Usually we come from different backgrounds. We come from different spaces. But I will say that in talking to you, very rarely do I find someone in real estate that has that psychology background that you have. And that's why we always joke in real estate about, yeah, I'm part psychologist, I'm part this, when we talk about what we do for a living, but you actually come from that space. And so as we are talking off camera, like I'm always interested to see what makes agents successful. And your background really does truly help your business. And so if we can get into delving deeper into the study of psychology, I know that you mentioned that you use dialectical behavior therapy, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Dialectical behavioral therapy, yeah, pretty close.
And can you explain what that is and how it has helped you personally and how it helps you with your approach to dealing with your real estate clients?
Yep. So basically, just to back up just a little bit, because I've always had a very altruistic and advocate kind of spirit, I was always looking for ways to impact people or community in positive ways from either a micro or macro lens. And through the years of working in nonprofits and in government and then real estate, I found that there were certain patterns that I saw across people that were very consistent. And even within myself. And when I recognized that I needed more support with emotional reactivity, with being better for myself so that I could give more to others, I specifically sought out this therapy because my younger sister mentions that it could have been something good for me to do. And so I read a book on it and then found a specific therapist, shout out to Emily, wherever she is, who helped me learn dialectical behavioral therapy. Dialectical behavioral therapy, to go back to your question, is based around 4 tiers. It's around being mindful, which is present in the moment. It's around recognizing that we will always have stressful or distressing situations occur in life, and we need to find ways to have tolerance to that distress. So distress tolerance is the second tier. The third tier is about there's a lot of emotions in life. There's a lot of stimuli that it can be both positive, negative, neutral, whatever it is. And how we regulate our emotions and how we create that space between reactivity and responsiveness can impact how we either are magnetic and attract opportunity and people to us or propel things away from us. So emotional regulation is the third tier. And then the fourth tier is interpersonal effectiveness. I don't always need to be correct. I don't always need to be the person who gets the last word, but I do need to be effective in order for this relationship, however long or short it might be, to get the most out of one another or to get something over the finish line. So being interpersonally effective is the fourth tier of dialectical behavioral therapy.
And it's I read a little bit about it after we had conversed a little bit about that. And something stuck out to me, something that you said when we had a conversation earlier in the week, that you're changing your own behavior to influence the potential decisions of other people, right? Is if I have that correct. And how in real estate, if I can ask that in terms of a real estate question, how does that influence you or your clients to lead to better outcomes for your buyers, your sellers, and even the agents that you're working with?
Thank you for the question. So the interesting thing about dialectical behavioral therapy is that unlike cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which has been around maybe from the 50s or so, don't quote me on the dates, but that is all about changing your thinking patterns in the hopes that it influence your behavior. But if you're dealing with high emotional reactivity, addiction, or just you are having a bad day because of something that has happened, it's very hard to tell yourself to stop ruminating, stop obsessing, to sleep now and not, stay awake all night. So it gets very challenging if you don't have the skills in your toolkit to change those behaviors. Dialectical behavioral therapy came about from Marsha Levitt. I may have gotten her name wrong, and I apologize to her. She is still alive. But it came around in the 90s, and it's all about if I break the habit or the behavior that I'm consistently doing, how does that influence my thinking in order to get better or more positive outcomes. With regard to real estate, a lot of times people go into these transactions looking at the other side as opposition, looking at the other side in a sense of confrontation. But the way that I approach business is if we're looking at life through a behavioral lens, rather than me be overly aggressive or overly confrontational, I want to behave in collaborative and supportive and emotionally validating ways, whether it is for my client, the agent on the other side, or the agent's client, so that I can have the most efficient communication as well as the best outcome for my side of the transaction. So it's really about being very aware of myself, being very aware of the different parties at the table, and also understanding how to create a setting where people's behaviors are not necessarily based on just the impulsive thinking, but instead on what is a goal and the outcome that I want, and how do I create a healthy trend of behavior that's going to get us to as close as possible to that healthy goal and outcome.
Yeah, and what I'm kind of gathering from you, like you talked about mindfulness and being aware of not only what's around you, but your own personal decision making, your reactiveness. It's almost like taking in an internal account or inventory about your own ways of communication in order to effectively communicate with others or move the ball down the line the best way that you can in a real estate transaction to get to the settlement table. It's almost like thinking things through a little bit more instead of being just reactive. Is that fair to say?
So yeah, that's definitely a part of the mindfulness. I think it's also a sense of if I remain present and not think about the anxiety of what could happen, because in real estate, there are so many variables. There are so many different spiraling emotions that are going on. There's something that will pop up that we didn't expect. So rather than focusing on what could be, we're focusing on what is. What number did they say? What term did they say? How do we behave in a way that is going to get us as close as possible to our desired outcome? That is like the part of business mindfulness. People are always trying to game each other and out chessboard one another, but then oftentimes they create worse problems for themselves because they didn't see what was coming down the pike because they were so focused on this other thing that didn't actually occur.
That's such a great answer. And it kind of correlates, and I'll go back, and I mentioned this before. I don't want to get hung up on this, but this year in particular, I got really into Stoicism. And one of the key pillars of Stoicism is to focus on the present. Yes. You can't control the future. The past has already happened. Let's stay in the present, because for me, I mean, I'm guilty, probably just like every other agent listening to this podcast, that sometimes I'm up at 3 a.m. worrying about the day ahead, right? What I need to do this, and this. What if this happens? What if that happens? And sometimes I just have to tell myself, stay in the present, because past is not prologue, and what happens in the future we can't control. Let's focus on the present and the now, because the anxiety of the future doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be. And so it sounds a lot like what you're saying.
So I highly recommend Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I read that book right before I started real estate. Additionally, because dialectical behavior is so new as a therapeutic process, it pulls from Stoicism. It pulls from Eastern meditation and mysticism. It pulls from a lot of different parts of the world where there's this continuity or through line of what has worked for the thinkers of our time or of past times, and how do we apply them to contemporary context? So how do we apply them either to our personal life, our business life, our romantic life? There's so many different ways that you can apply it. And when you see that overlap is when you're finding something that is worth studying and worth learning about.
Yep. When you see those things kind of, it doesn't matter what you're studying, but you see these concepts time and time again. They have worked for millennia, and they are tried and true and will work for just humans in general. It doesn't matter what time period that you grew up in or where you're from. There are truisms in life. I truly believe that will help us get through it. So, all right. So I want to turn this back to real estate. And so for many sellers, letting go of their home, their current home, is like closing a chapter of their lives. You know, it meant a lot to them. Maybe they've been in there 30 or 40 years. In your opinion, what's the best way for agents to help these clients that have been in their homes for such a long period of time through that emotional transition? Is there anything that you do in particular to help guide your people and have that empathy for them?
Yeah. So when someone is selling a property, especially one that they've lived in, it is extremely important to validate the history that was there, and but at the same time, not get them hung up on what was, because there is a new chapter, there is a new book that they are writing. So I want to hear about the grandkids who've lived there for this amount of time or come back to see them. I want to hear about the stories and the memories and things. I want to sit, process, be mindful and present in those moments, because they're very important to these people. And they're not just numbers. They're not a price tag or a bag of money. They're actually humans who have a lot of history that they cannot encapsulate and share in one meeting. But with that kind of empathetic position taking that that DBT teaches you, you can sit in their emotions and sit with their feelings and ride the wave with them, while then redirecting them to, okay, what are your goals here? What are your goals personally? What are your goals financially? And what are we trying to do that's going to move you to the next chapter, echelon, version of yourself? Because that is why I am here. So I can both be there for you emotionally and shoulder those emotions without them being a burden, because DBT has taught me how to protect my own space and my own energy without absorbing yours, but I can still feel with you. But then we need to turn to, what are we trying to do here? And how are we going to, and what strategies are we going to employ that are specific to your life, your home, your needs?
I love that. It's like acknowledging what was, but that line of delineation that you have there, like you said, protecting your own space. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I would say it's like you are both that real estate advisor facilitator. You're not just, you're not just like a someone who's just providing a service really quick, and you're not just making a coffee and then giving it to them and then it's done. But at the same time, and I've been a barista, so there's no shame in doing that either. But also at the same time, you are actually allowing them to emote. When I do something with probate, I don't come in there acting like, okay, let's get this off of your back, blah blah. I want to hear, who owned this home? How are you related to this person? How did that relationship improve your life? Or why are you connected to this story or this memory of this life well lived? And I do something, where I make sure that I provide a small memento, whether they work for me or not, to say like, hey, I know that it's hard letting go of something that is either was within your family for a long period of time, or something that you've made a lot of memories with. So I'm going to validate those emotions, because although I know many people can or should do that for themselves, I'm here to say that I'm not just trying to rush you through your emotional process, because I don't think good outcomes come from making people bottle things away and then forcing them to impulsively make decisions before they might be ready.
That's a terrific point. And we're talking about sellers and the history of, their property and what that may mean to them. But buying a home is often the largest financial decision people are going to make. And often that's based on more emotion than logic. And so with your knowledge, how do you best guide your clients through that emotional pressure then of buying a home, if we can flip it over to buyers?
So with buyers, the challenge is that there's so much opacity in the process. And because you're looking at all these different homes, which have different sellers with different needs, with different types of agents, there's a lot more, there could be a lot more chaos because of that emotional reactivity that buyers feel. So the way that I approach them is, once again, I take that empathetic position taking where I understand, okay, you're a first time buyer, you have no idea what's going on. Or, oh, you're a buyer from out of state, you've never been in a state without lawyers doing this transaction with you. Or you are a buyer who is downsizing for the first time, and downsizing means that you're aging and you are now moving, and now you're moving to a space that may not feel what home used to feel like. So again, it's both understanding that there's a lot of emotions here that are raw and real, while at the same time being kind of a steward for this is how we need to approach this particular seller and property. This is how we need to approach this particular price point. This is how we need to approach this particular negotiation or this particular type of terms. And I've found that I've been most effective with buyers when I sit with them, I do not rush them, and I allow them to both emote on what is their motivation for buying, just like sellers need to tell you what their motivation for selling is, but then also how each approach to each home is going to be slightly different if we are taking the time to pay attention and be aware of our actions and behaviors in that approach to each different asset that we're going for.
We talk about sellers and buyers. We talk about, the psychology of dealing with our own clients. But a big part of what we do is dealing with other agents.
Right.
And so much of what we do can be pretty tense at times. When we're in a negotiation, we're going back and forth. And unfortunately, many agents, it doesn't matter if they're new, if they're seasoned, they've been around for 40 years or, they've been working for 6 months. There are just certain agents that treat each other like adversaries and not like two colleagues working together to find a common way forward in a transaction. And so I'm curious, is there a psychological approach that you use with difficult agents in order to help them stay focused on finding solutions together?
Yes, so this industry is extremely challenging. And that's one of the things I like about it because I intentionally chose to create this business. I work best with my back against the wall, and I work best in chaos. So when I am navigating challenging agents, I don't look at them as adversaries. I look at them as what can be, again, stressing them out. How might their client be treating them, and why are they behaving like this? Is it because they have a control issue? Is it because they are overly stressed and spread thin because they're so busy? Is it because their client is being really hard on them? Is it because they have a personal issue that's going on? So I go through a lot of different questions of, okay, this person is behaving like this. It could mean these different things. And you'll never know a certain answer, but what it allows me to do is create compassion for the agent that is behaving poorly. So I can't control their behavior, but I can control mine. So if you approach me with fire, I'm going to approach you with water because I'm going to extinguish you. Because if you have nothing to grasp onto, like, oh, he's such a ABC, then you're going to regulate, without you knowing that I'm helping you regulate. So I am always going to approach in a way that is counter or similar to how the other person is approaching based on how they're starting. And that way we can be effective because I don't care if you like me. I don't care if you think you're better than me, but I know that I'm very effective.
That is such a great answer because I feel like, again, we get into a reactive state a lot of times. This person says, this to us or something that you deem as out of bounds or inappropriate and immediately you want to fire back. But if our ultimate goal is to benefit our clients and get to the finish line, sometimes you got to find a different approach. Like you had said, you can control your own behavior and how you get to the finish line, and you can be effective with other people without them even knowing and kind of guiding them or steering them in the direction that you want to without them thinking that's what you're doing.
Right.
And I think that it's almost like that Jedi mind trick, right, that we can work with, even though there is a science behind it that, we're talking about now. So I do want to talk about personality types because in real estate, clients other agents. We're always dealing with different personalities. So how, do we effectively communicate or connect with those personalities to do our job well? And so I have two questions for you. When you meet with a new client or become a co-op with an agent that you don't know very well, are you first trying to define their personality type, almost like a DISC assessment? And do you find that once you do define their personality type, okay, then are you figuring out strategies that are effective for that personality type?
Yeah, so I am very careful to project my own perspective on personality type onto people because people can surprise you. So what I first do is I just kind of like approach generally how I would in any context where I'm just trying to create a healthy, normal communication style where I'm watching my behavior and I'm being cordial and I'm being friendly. And then I let people show me how they think and how they perceive information. And then I might tweak strategy after they kind of have leaned into a specific archetype, whether that's, a more analytical, where like the agent or the client isn't swayed unless you have a heavy amount of numbers, or more expressive and artistic, the person or usually the consumer rather than the agent. But you can have some creative agents as well, where they want to talk more about like the aesthetic of things or the quality or the materials or the textures. So like kind of understanding, people will tell you who they are or they'll show you who they are without you thinking that without like doing much work. So I am not trying to push my perspective onto you. I'm allowing people to show me their personality, show me where they kind of fit. And then because of my psychology background, because of my growth through chaos, I will adapt myself and chameleon myself while still holding authentic to who I am and my values to be effective in how I communicate with them.
That, again, is a special skill. Obviously, you must be doing that well with the success that you're achieving in real estate. And I want to know, are there specific techniques we talked about, like adjusting? You're just telling me that now. You're adjusting your style and how you communicate to be effective. Are there specific techniques that you use with clients, like, for instance, mirroring or labeling? There's the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss and some of those FBI communicating skills that he teaches us to communicate with. Are you using anything specifically that you're equipped to use with your clients?
So I love the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I just was in a book panel about that a couple weeks ago. So I actually do use a lot of those negotiation strategies because they are extremely effective at not only diffusing situations, but also building trust and getting people to kind of see your side of things without you shoving it down their throat. So, mirroring, just trying to kind of do similar behaviors or use similar speech patterns to build trust and comfort, even if the person's not perceiving it. Labeling, saying saying what's between the lines that people don't want to maybe address. So, oh, it seems that you are fearing that you're not going to get a high enough return, Mr. Seller, and because of that fear, you are not negotiating in good faith. By putting it out there, then they can say yes or no, but then we have more context that we can kind of build off of. And I also try to get people to the place of no. Because if I get to the place of no, then at least I have more data information on how I can move forward. But if we don't have a place of no, if I'm trying to convince like an open house person, for example, to go on a tour with me and they say yes, 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 but then there's no real context of when the yes is going to start, then it's not a real yes. So it's trying to kind of use specific negotiation strategies, in particular from that book, that help you build rapport, build trust, and get the people to see your perspective without forcing them or dragging them. Because if people get dragged or feel like they're being pressured, that's the quickest way for them to go the opposite direction.
Absolutely. And, things like even the smallest thing, like the modulation of your voice, like talking like the late night DJ, right? We're going to slow it down and I'm going to talk really soft, has a psychological effect on everybody that you're dealing with. And they don't even know it, but it's there. And I'm fascinated by that. How you can be not manipulated, but how someone can be affected by the way, again, that you treat your own behavior and how you communicate.
And so, and because of like the late night DJ voice provided me, you know, having worked in like municipal politics and just watching politics since I was 10 years old, there's a lot of theater in life. There's a lot of theater, not only in politics, as we constantly are seeing, but in real estate as well. Not everything that you're receiving from the other side is always the honest truth, but recognizing that there is a bit of like, I wouldn't say manipulation, but a bit of framing things or reframing things in a way that's going to be palpable to the other side is really important. So whether that is the tone or whether that is the specific language of which you're using, this stuff is not only scientifically backed, but it allows people to feel less threatened and thus work from a place that is more collaborative with you than antagonistic to you.
Again, that's a great point. I think I do want to ask you this because you're not necessarily going into a meeting with a potential client or an agent, like you said, trying to pin them down personality type because they may surprise you, like you said. But I can tell you just the analytical personality, the engineers, the doctors, the accountants, for me, are always the most challenging people to potentially deal with because they are about hard facts and figures. They want to read every line of the contract. It's not that I don't deal with those personality types. I certainly do. But to me, with my personality type, those are the most challenging people that I tend to deal with. I want to know, is there a personality type for you, even with your background, that sometimes you're like, oh, this may be a challenge for me based on XYZ about their personality?
It's interesting. I've had this type of question in different contexts before, and because I've gotten so good at controlling myself and understanding the needs of others, it's become more challenging to say this particular personality type doesn't work well with me. I will say maybe the personality type where people are extremely passionate, extremely emotional. Sometimes certain artistic types can be a little bit more challenging simply because they feel things deeper. They experience the world more intimately, and thus small slights that might feel small to you and I might feel a lot larger to them, which creates an adrenaline rush, which then takes longer for them to self-soothe if they know how to self-soothe. So I can navigate those people. I understand what's going on internally within their body and within their mind. However, it takes more out of you because you have to use more control and more energy from yourself in order to soothe them and give them the necessary information or frame it in a way that's going to help them calm a little bit more quickly for us to get back to work and back to business. So I've had a lot of those people. It's not, it's not the end of the world, but it takes more out of me than, let's say, an analytical person. You want me to bring you a bunch of numbers and drown you in data? Let's go. I'll make you read all night if you need to.
Yeah, and that's getting back to kind of just who we are, right? Like you said, it all comes back to controlling ourselves because in the end, if we're controlling what we do on our end, we'll be able to effectively communicate with any personality type. Hopefully that's going to be the case, but we can control what we can control.
Right.
And that's all we can do. We
Right.
can't control other people's reactions or emotions, but we can guide them. So I want to talk about, real estate in general. It's such a relationship business. Everything that we do is based on relationships. So obviously people know, like, and trust you as their agent. You've grown your business quickly over a relatively short time frame. And in your opinion, what's the key to building those strong relationships with your own clients in order to have them be your realtor for life? Because you're 35 years old. You want that repeat business. You want to keep your clients for as long as you're going to be in real estate. What is the key to building those strong relationships in your opinion?
Yeah, so life in general is about your ability to cultivate or maintain relationships, see the needs of others and be empathetic towards them, and then be consistent in their lives. So the way that I have approached my clients is that I do not rush them for anything. Like I do not have commission breath. I do not have this sense of urgency unless we are in a specific type of transaction where if you don't behave in a certain way or by a certain timeline, you might lose XYZ. But other than that, I have done a lot more listening to what their grandkids do or listening to what they do for work and what is stressing them out that day or what they're really proud of, and just being more of a sounding board. Because by allowing myself to be open to the journey of the relationship and and them wanting to share, it creates a lot more trust because they don't see you as just a service provider. They see you as someone who is being a friend or behaving in a way that a lot of times their family won't behave in because they've, have a certain relationship with them. So it creates this sense of this bond. It could be a long-term bond, which I do have with some of my clients. Although I've been running this business, in the more recent time period, I've already had repeat business from my clients, and that's because they trust me. They know that I'm not here to rush them, and they know that I genuinely care because I come from a background of nonprofits, of politics, where the goal was to make people's lives better, and the therapy that I'm using is for myself is to remind myself and to remind others that life is worth living and that you can get the most out of it when you take the time to listen and empathize and be compassionate, not just sympathetic to the needs of others. And people feel the difference.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like you're doing business by not doing business, right? When you try and think about you had mentioned commission breath before, right? Like when you think of things strictly in terms of money, that's usually you're making the wrong decision, right? The money is the byproduct of what we do and the connection that we make with those people, right? If we're out to help people first, then we tend to do very well in our business. And so I'm going to leave it at that for this podcast because we're running out of time. So one last question for you. Since you're on the inside of the modeling industry, how true to life is the movie Zoolander?
I would say it's almost 100% accurate. The modeling industry, it has a lot of fun stuff, but it's not nearly as glamorous as people think it is. I really like real estate because I can communicate and I don't have to just be a face of something. I can be a full-fledged person, and modeling and the things that are creative pursuits are fun and I'm going to continue pursuing them. But real estate and business are really where my life is at.
All right. So that obviously I'm joking with that question. Okay. But I do want to know, like, as a model,
Okay.
do you have to practice in Zoo, and I'm going to reference Zoolander again, and I'm sorry for this because I'm not making light of it, but it talks about Derek Zoolander's looks, right? He has this look that he looks into the camera and it's either, Le Tigre or Blue Steel or Magnum, and they're all the same face, and that's the running joke.
Right.
You actually have to practice before you go out on a shoot. Are you practicing how you look, how you stand, how your facial expressions are? Do you have to do that kind of thing? Like, seriously?
So, seriously, there is a lot of psychology behind modeling. You have to understand emotions and how to feel those emotions like an actor, and you need to be able to express them in your face with very minute detail and very minute changes. And the people who are most successful in modeling are the people who know how to do that and know how to make that piece of clothing, that perfume, that washing machine look really good. So if you have a control and awareness of your body from the smallest details, you can make a lot of money and impact in modeling. For me, modeling has been a very fun endeavor. I was signed in Philadelphia. I was signed in New York. But I want to be in control of my own brand. I want to be in control of my own look. I want to be able to speak and not just be seen. And that's why real estate is the career for me.
Well, you and I were talking about, all the things that we're doing besides real estate. And if I was in the modeling business, I would definitely be a hand model. So I don't have the face for it. You do. But yeah, I have decent hands. So maybe I could pick up some Rolex.
I think you're being hard on yourself because people think modeling is just about fashion. People don't make a lot of money in fashion. They make a lot of money in commercial modeling, which is people who are relatable to others. Why would they want to see a guy with red hair and a very specific skin color that doesn't relate to as many people selling something like something in your household? You need more normal people of all different types because those are the relatable people. And those people, the commercial models, make the most money.
All right.
So that's just kind of a small piece.
Well, if any model agencies are listening, I am available for hire. I work very cheaply. So, so
you get a lot of business because of it.
I was going to say, got that going for me. So anyway, Julian, thank you so much for joining me today. It was great to get to know you a little bit. This is, we had one conversation before this, but this is really the chance to meet you, get to know you, know what you're all about, and I can see why you're successful in your business. So I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. It was really great to get to talk to you, especially about such a fascinating topic.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time, Jason. This is fun to talk about psychology. It's fun to talk about business. And, I think I am so grateful and lucky to be a part of Berkshire Hathaway, Fox and Roach. And I know there's a lot more success for all of us in the future.
Thanks, Julian. That was the podcast with my special guest, Julian Domanico, this week. Here are a few takeaways that I had in talking with Julian. So much of what we do in real estate is out of our control. And despite the fact that we may have anxiety about this issue or what tomorrow will bring or how are we going to solve this problem, there is much that we cannot do, and sometimes we tie ourselves up in knots over things that we cannot control. So what we can control, according to Julian, is how we behave, how we perceive the world around us, how we deal with our clients, how we can control and modulate our emotions in order to better serve our clients. If we focus first on the things that we can control, like how we react to certain situations, then the transaction is going to be much better off, despite the fact that you may be working with a very difficult buyer, seller, or even another agent that you're cooperating with. If we control our own behavior, that will lead to an effect on the behavior of others, making the transaction better for all parties involved. Number two, don't forget to have empathy for your clients. A lot of our clients have been in their homes for 30 or 40 years on the selling side. They've made so many memories there, and they are emotionally attached to their property. We have to remind ourselves that sometimes when we're dealing with our clients, right? On the buying side, it can be such a stressful experience when it comes to dealing with the home inspections. They're going through the mortgage and appraisal process. They have title stuff to deal with. And then, oh, by the way, they have to make the move. They have to get their movers lined up. They have to deal with utilities. All of this is chaos to them. And so we have to empathize and sympathize with both our buyers and sellers to be effective at what we do. Don't forget that a little empathy and a little sympathy can go a long way with your people. Last but not least, we touched upon in this episode how when you're working with another agent, you don't have to be adversaries. You should be working towards a common goal because, let's be frank, if the transaction doesn't close, neither of you get paid. So what use is it to try and pit yourself against another agent in a transaction? Try to modulate your emotions, stay focused on the goal at hand, despite how the other agent may be acting. Ask yourself, is it about winning an argument, or is it about getting to the settlement table and doing the best job we can for our clients? Well, that's it for the podcast this week. We will be back in another couple of weeks with a new topic, a new guest, and as always, if you want to hear a topic that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the podcast yet or left us a review, please do so. It helps us to reach more people. Once again, this is Jason Ostrowski saying stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.